pretty easy to tell that they're dying of Bt poisoning. It's very, very interesting what it does to the caterpillar. But I looked out there and here these big old caterpillars are all of a sudden dying of Bt poisoning. But guess what? I hadn't sprayed any Bt. But I have been spraying with molasses. And apparently there was just enough natural Bt in the environment that the molasses stimulated enough that it took care of all the caterpillars. Other than that, you're not likely to have many problems with peppers. The hornworm is about the only thing I ever see on them. Most people that have problems plant them too early, but do stake them, do brace them up, because you will get a lot of pounds of peppers off every plant. Yes, ma'am.
How many plants will you put in that cage?
Oh, and that little thing I'll put 2, just like I do the tomatoes. I do the same thing with eggplant. We'll talk about eggplant in just a minute. Yes?
Bob, is there a shelf life on the seaweed and molasses mixture?
Yeah, probably 20 years. Bt has a shelf life of about 30 years.
Can you use it on any plant then?
Oh,
or
yeah.
vegetable?
Yeah. The only place I don't use it a lot on is white flowers, because the molasses will leave a little bit of a brown stain. But let me tell you, it makes a big difference on everything you grow. Yes, sir.
Bob, I took a pepper plant I had in a container in my garage over the winter, and it still looks pretty good. Can I continue to?
Absolutely. Where peppers grow natively, which is mainly Central and South America, they're perennials. They live for years. I've known people that had jalapenos that produced for 3 or 4 years if they kept them from freezing. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between regular molasses and blackstrap molasses?
The blackstrap has a little more sulfur in it, has a few more minerals in it. As far as its practical application, it's the same. Any molasses is good molasses. Yes, sir.
Will Bt work on thrips?
No. Bt works on caterpillars only. Beneficial nematode works on thrips if they're still in the ground. If you got thrips insect problems, now we're getting right toward the end of the time you can put out the nematodes to control the larval state. Once they're up and in the air, they're going to deal you some misery. Garlic is a good repellent. If you get thrips on your plants, spray your plants with one of the garlic sprays and you'll have fewer thrips problems. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, I might as well go ahead and mention eggplant. Basically everything I told you about peppers applies for eggplants. That's about all you need to know about them. The variety of eggplant that I like the best is Ichiban. It's a long Japanese dark purple eggplant. The reason is that it's never bitter. I don't think I've ever picked Japanese eggplant, young or somewhat overgrown, that didn't taste good. If you grow the big round black ones, one's called Black Beauty, and there's several different varieties, sometimes they're bitter, sometimes they're not. A lot has to do with how much moisture they have received. But eggplant are easy to grow, and if you wonder if they're any good to eat, go over to P.F. Chang's sometime and order their minced chicken and eggplant. That's got Ichiban eggplant in it. I tell you, it's one of the best dishes on the menu over there. Eggplant's wonderful and easy to grow. I grow it in the top of these cages. Again, 2 plants per cage. They're a hot weather plant though. Don't plant them until you plant your peppers. And do watch for fire ants. Fire ants will eat eggplant, but you certainly can control them. And eggplant is just really easy to grow and really, really delicious. Beans, anybody interested in beans? Okay. Beans are a legume. Beans actually improve the soil when you plant them. And what happens, I was looking to see if I had a package of beans. I thought I would here, but I won't worry about it. Beans and peas are plants that have the ability to form an association with a type of bacteria, thanks for coming guys, that actually this bacteria is capable of taking nitrogen out of the air and turning it into fertilizer. Azobacter, nitrobacter, there are a bunch of different types of bacteria that do this. This is why in the olden days, as we might say, of our ancestors and things, before the days of fertilizers and things, farmers would tend to plant beans one year and corn the next, and then beans and then corn. Corn is a big nutrient robber. It steals a lot out of the soil. Beans put a lot back into the soil. So by rotating these crops, their soil stayed relatively productive. Doesn't really matter with us because we're improving the soil. But if you want the best possible production from your beans and peas, you would like them to have this bacteria on their roots, form little nodules on their roots. And it makes them grow bigger, makes them produce more. The first year that you put beans or peas into a given area, inoculate the seed. What I do is take the seed and I will soak it for an hour or so in water just to plump it up. Then I'll simply put my hand over the top of the cup, pour the water off, the seed's nice and moist. I'll put a little bit of this material in there and shake it up. And I mean, the seed just turns black. This stuff is almost as fine as graphite. But it really does make a difference in the way they produce. The good news too is that once you've used it in a given area, if you continue to plant beans and peas in that same area, you don't ever have to use it again. It stays in the soil right there. So this is something you really only worry about the first time you treat. I usually do it every time I plant beans or peas though, because I move things around in my garden just kind of at random for no particular reason. But if I grew beans last year over here and I planted beans back into this area, I wouldn't treat the seed. But if I plant them over here next year, I will treat the seed. But the first year you plant beans, which include lima beans, green beans, black-eyed peas, or peas like the snow peas, the edible pod peas, I'll be picking those pretty soon. And I will watch some people over at Sun Harvest or Whole Foods paying $7 a pound. I'll just smile and go and pick them. Only problem I have in my garden with picking things like the snow peas is so few of them make them into the bag. Just when you can just pick it off and eat it. Please don't tell my employees because they think I just am a lousy grower of snow peas because I never bring very many to share. Simple matter that I eat too many before I even get back into the kitchen with them.
What's the name of that product?
It's just called Inoculant. This particular one is called Garden Inoculant. Sometimes you'll see it sold under the name of Nitrogen, and it's spelled G-I-N instead of G-E-N. But it'll really make a difference in the production you get from beans and peas. One thing, then I'll answer the question. Now, there are two habits of growth on beans. Some are what we call bush beans, and some are what we call pole beans. Bush beans, from the time you plant the seed until you start picking, is a shorter period of time. Pole beans take a longer period of time to begin production. But the other thing about bush beans is they make a lot more beans in a hurry than pole beans do. But they play out. You plant a crop of bush beans, you're going to pick for them for 3, maybe 4 weeks at most, and that's it. You might as well pull them up and start over. So if you want to have a lot of beans in a hurry, plant bush beans. If you don't mind bending over to pick, plant bush beans. If you plant pole beans, it will take a longer period of time for them to start producing, but they will produce all summer long if you keep the spider mites off of them with the seaweed and molasses. And you can, you'll pick and pick and pick, and the nice thing about those, you're picking up at, eye level sometimes, so you don't spend quite as much time bent double in picking. But they both produce very well. And some varieties, Blue Lake for instance, one of our old-fashioned beans, it comes as a bush form and as a pole form. So you can buy bush Blue Lake or pole Blue Lake. Just don't get them mixed up because you don't have to support the bush form, but you do have to support the pole form. Now, what if you don't have enough fence or whatever to grow pole beans? You take an extra tomato cage and plant 8 or 10 seeds at that and just let them grow up the tomato cage. I grow a lot of vining plants, on extra tomato cages. Just because I run out of room. I have trellises. I use those big old heavy wire, what they call cattle panels or bull wire, that really tough hard stuff, comes 4 or 5 feet wide. Some of them have 4x4 openings, some of them have 6x6. I have those set up with 3 posts for a 20-foot length of it, and that's what I grow a lot of my, vining crops on. That's what I grow pole beans on for the most part, but you can also grow them on a tomato cage really well. Questions about beans? They get spider mites, spray them with seaweed. Yes, sir.
As far as the bacteria in the inoculate, it basically is in one place, and how far away will they move?
As far as the roots go.
As far as roots go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we grow soybeans here?
Yes, ma'am. I'm still experimenting to find the best variety. I've had moderate success with one from Renee's Seeds, or one of those that they call edamame soybeans. Edamame, which I love, can be almost any soybean. And they've been fair producers, but I'm going to plant 4 varieties of soybeans this year just to see which ones will produce the best.
Do you carry the seeds? 'Cause
Yeah.
I can't find them.
Yeah, we have them in the warm season. They probably are out in there now. If not, we'll have them out very shortly. I didn't take them all for me. Yes, ma'am?
The inoculant, does it have a shelf life?
A couple of years. Keep it in the refrigerator and it's good for a couple of years.
And you can't just spread it over the
No,
ground?
needs to be in association with the seed.
But you need to soak the seed, right?
You don't have to, but it sticks better if you do.
Well, can you just wet them and just do it and do it?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, but Where's the price? $8 or $10 a bag. I mean, this is enough to do thousands of seeds, but I wouldn't want to buy enough to scatter this all over the ground. So it's more effective just put it in direct contact with the seed. Question?
Do you have to worry about washing your vegetables before you eat them, or, you know?
Do you have a dog?
Well, I have my garden page